let's go ahead and get started. Um, do we have any corrections to the minutes? All right, I'm not hearing any corrections to the minutes, so they'll stand as read. Item number one.
Okay. Yeah, so this was a big chunk of your packet. And just to give an overview of it, our intern and Scott Heacock, our associate planner, who's preparing our active transportation plan, they were looking through these two main kind of guidelines from Rochester and from Sun Prairie as kind of guiding documents that we could prepare for our own active transportation plan. And what we really liked about these documents is that, it goes through, kind of these major pedestrian bicycle facilities that cities can implement. And then I believe the Sun Prairie one specifically had, specifications that the engineers really want to see and use. And, that's one of the main holdups is people always say we want these kinds of things, but, we don't have any standards for them. So we would like to prepare, kind of um, Middleton's priorities for these sorts of facilities, and then, start being able to prepare those kinds of specifications and details for our engineers and for our public works department. And so, the Rochester one has, a lot of different ideas, and the Sun Prairie one has them all kind of more condensed, but we wanted to hear what you guys thought of which ones, we should really start prioritizing, and ones that you'd like to see definitely included in the active transportation plan.
All right, so I'm going to actually I took a bunch of notes on this. I wanted to kind of uh, take advantage of that. That sounds horrible. I kind of wanted to help kind of set the discussion here. So I do want to know exactly what we mean by prioritize in this context. So we have the examples are these two lists of interventions. Are we interested in, well, I'll let you answer without
Providing me some
well, without no,
yeah, yeah.
without trying to lead too
Yeah,
much.
yeah, of course. Yeah, so I think like the idea is to take as many of these as possible through to, into the plan, but we would like to see, which ones you think Middleton is in like most desperate need of in those cases, and then also what you would like to, I guess, just prioritize more because some of them were like just kind of like striping different things, or, some of them were like raised crosswalks, which we've started to implement in some areas in Middleton. And so we'd really like to just hear what you guys want to see more of, and think that we should, really strive for. And then that way we can also maybe like put them higher up in the document. That way, when Public Works goes through it, however many, the Rochester one was like 60 pages long or something. And so, like we're not going to put all the important ones at the end. We'd like to put those, front and center and like right at the top so they know which ones that, are really important.
Okay, that's good to know.
Hmm.
Um, so to me, the biggest thing we need to prioritize isn't necessarily these guidelines,
Hmm.
uh, but an idea of where we actually want to end up. Um,
Okay.
just to reiterate for people who haven't, for people who aren't Kirsten and haven't heard, and maybe Dale and haven't heard me harangue on street parking at length in the past. That's just an example of something I am not particularly fond of. Um, it interferes with traffic. It's not safe for anybody, from the people driving to pedestrians and cyclists. doesn't provide that much parking, creates maintenance problems. Um, and because it's usually just done by widening the streets, it encourages people to speed. So there are specific guidelines we can do to make on-street parking better. But unless we combine that with the theory of, yes, we're going to keep on-street parking, or we would like to phase it out over time, like we'll just keep doing whatever. So we need to we need to basically have a theory of where we're going with this for any of our specific guidelines to really make any sense. Otherwise, we're just kind of gonna flail about, so to speak. And then the other, oh wait, I have two more. Okay, the next big thing we need to prioritize related to this is kind of a traffic plan so that we have an idea of where we're putting these things. And this is more than just labeling streets as local collector arterial. This is like how our ideal of where we would like traffic to actually move around the city. So the active transportation plan is itself is the ped and bike component of that, or ped and micromobility if you prefer. Um, so that's a good step, but we'll want to revisit this for other transportation types as well. And then my last big thing is actually kind of an organizational thing. I would like our toolkit section of this to be, I would I would honestly like an active transportation plan, a complete streets guide, which I am still technically working on. I know I'm way behind on that, but I'm still technically working on it. And then the toolkit. And that way, the toolkit of interventions can be referenced by both of those things. But that way, we don't have, because both of those are going to reference the toolkit a lot. And what we don't want is those documents getting out of sync, especially, I do really like the Sun Prairie approach of putting specifications right in there. That's good. So if we're going to have those specifications, we want them keeping up in sync with those two. So that formatting is something we will need to consider. Okay, I will stop talking for a while. Unless nobody else has anything, and then I'll jump right back in.
I can jump in unless Kirsten, did you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah. The main thing, to build on what Tad was saying is, yes, we need to have everything congruent, but also a focus on safe routes to school, safe routes to work. So commuter routes. I think that needs to be a big focus of our transportation plan. Minneapolis has done a great job of that with making thoroughfares that are much more bike friendly. Like if you've been to Minneapolis, Park and Portland are one ways from, I guess, the west side to right into downtown. And there are very few lights or stop signs on those roads for cyclists. And the ones that are there are very easy to trigger. So it's a lot faster. And I think that we really need to be thinking about that as well, and not just as recreation. So safe crossings, safe bike lanes, bike paths that lead somewhere, having that objective of where does it go and is it fast for those who are commuting. So that's all I'll add.
Yeah.
And I do like Sun Prairie's as well in detail. I like Rochester's for the pictures, but Sun Prairie for the detail.
Just from a format perspective, I thought Sun Prairie's was much easier to digest than Rochester's. Rochester's was a long document, and I had to fight to keep my eyes from glazing over, but the pictures were nice. I think I similarly struggled a little bit to just evaluate these in a vacuum. As I was going through, I thought many of the interventions looked good and looked like they could work under the right circumstances. I found myself, and I'm sure, Daphne and everybody else, like you guys have this data and you've looked at this data. And so this is more just a gap in my knowledge, but I found myself wanting to start with, well, what did the data tell us about what the problem intersections are? And then let's focus on the right interventions for those intersections. But then beyond just the data, and I'd actually, this is informed, I had pulled a data crash incident report from the police on a intersection that I have observed to be a problem. So I'm talking about University and Middleton Street, right where I live. I've personally observed at least 3 crashes there in the last year, but the numbers actually didn't really bear that out. And that may be a longer conversation. I think they had said that there were actually 2 crashes in the last year. So I'd go beyond just like what the hard, data say and like what anecdotally, right, do people tell us as like these are really challenging intersections, both from a commuting standpoint, a kids crossing standpoint, just like a general, comfort and safety. And then think about again what solutions we can use to address those intersections. I also found myself wondering about costs. I know we've talked about costs at various points for some of these solutions. Some are just much more cost effective than others. And so maybe this isn't the right document to document those costs, but that seems to be such an important part of the equation. And then as well, effectiveness, right? Like where do we get the biggest bang for our buck? And I don't have that background. And so that'd be really interesting, I think, to know what some of these, what are the most effective and cost effective solutions that give us the greatest return, if you will.
Daphne, I'm just wondering if we could go back a step. I'm just trying to get a better handle on what is the active transportation plan? I know we were looking at a toolkit, so these were things that could be that our committee might suggest to it, but I'm just trying to get a handle of what goes into the active transportation plan. I mean, it's more than just pedestrian and bike? Could you say a little more about it?
Yeah, that's a good point. I realized, there's a lot of new people on the committee who, kind of just joined in between all of this. So, the active transportation plan is an update to Middleton's bicycle and pedestrian plan, which the last time we had updated was in 2009. So it's pretty out of date. And the main focus of that plan was just like, where are the bike paths? Where are we going to put in new paths or trails? That sort of thing. And in this round, our aim is really to, include a lot more of the other modes of transportation. So not just bicycling and pedestrians, but, the micro mobility aspect, and then also a lot of, these safety aspects. And so that's why we have this toolkit here, is because as we've been developing more of the trails and such that were in the 2009 plan, the next biggest issue has kind of come up has been, safety and how can people move safely around Middleton. And so that's why this focus, I mean, we kind of just dove right in with these toolkits, because these are kind of the things that we've seen from other communities that they've come up with to make these areas a lot safer. And so does that help answer your question and everyone else's questions about that? Yeah.
Well, I'll just say the things that sort of jumped at me, but other things that came up in this, and maybe some of them aren't appropriate here, but I was thinking of something that we've talked about before, but I don't know that we have any of these. I was thinking more about bike routes and bike boulevards, and do we have any, and this goes back to some of the things that were raised earlier, do we have a plan for any of that, where we can funnel traffic? And again, at least my awareness of what goes on in Middleton, I'm not aware of any other than the bike trails that we have. So that would be something that for me, that might be a priority, especially as some of the streets are being paved now, to think about which ones are going to be our bike routes through town, especially connecting up to some of the new trails. Even I'm imagining, and related to that, I was thinking, oh, do we need more route finding and signage? I don't know who's in charge of, for instance, the signage for the Lake Mendota route, but that's moving its way through now. And I'm thinking, as we at least plan forward, is that our responsibility, or is that the county? I don't know, but that'd be a question. How can we help with that, as well as connecting with other paths that run through Middleton? So that struck me. Another thing, and again, maybe it doesn't go here, but it's something that I think we were all made aware of on the what was it? Our bike ride on, what was that? For biking week, but is there a plan for, resurfacing, rebuilding our bike trails? There are some pretty bad sections, and I don't know who does that. I don't know, I assume it's Public Works, but I don't know how they prioritize things and where we give our input. But clearly there's some parts that I guess we need to have a plan for. When do we do it and how, which gets done first? So that's what struck me. Didn't see it quite in the toolkit. It's not a tool, but it's kind of a basic necessity. I don't know. Those were, I guess, some of the things that sort of struck me as I was looking through that.
Yeah, and those are really good points that I think we were planning on bringing this at the next, either the next one, I believe, is our joint with Public Works, or after that one, is Scott Heacock and I have created like a really big map that we can, this might be better for our in-person one where, we can actually sit down and see what is where, and like just draw straight on the maps and get into, where are these routes, what's connecting to where in the region. And then maintenance has become more ingrained into this process as we met with Public Works and we met with our Parks and Rec department. And Parks and Rec, they do most of like the on off street trails. And those paths, so like the Conservancy one is the big one, and then the one on the west side of the Beltline, through like the business park areas, they maintain a lot of those. And so they're also trying to think of how they can get onto kind of a like a cycle to resurface a lot of these paths that are becoming, a little less nice. And so that is it is starting to be incorporated into here, but I think the Parks Department they're developing kind of like their own 5-year trails plan to kind of get on top of maintaining all of that. So what the ATP will at least be like part of that process, but it'll basically be one step to help parks develop their 5-year trails plan. Any other comments?
Well, I was about to say other comments before I start talking again.
Yeah, go ahead, Ted.
All right. So, in terms of priority, general priorities, I would like to prioritize intersection stuff overall. Um, that's intersection treatments are the most important thing for safe facilities. They're inherently the locations with the most conflicts, and then mixing modes, especially of highly different speeds, will lead to even more conflicts. Um, on that note, one of the things I think that's probably a really good intervention is curb extensions. Um, they're fairly effective as an intervention in general, but on top of that, they're relatively easy to implement in a quick build, also known as tactical urbanism sort of way, because you don't need to jump from the current situation all the way to a full concrete installation right away. You can use paint and planters and posts to do an experimental shape. You can collect data and you can design exactly what you need. Um, so prioritizing, I think that's another thing related to budget. I think prioritizing things that can be implemented through quick build methods, um, in an experimental stage followed by a refinement stage followed by the actual full concrete, is going to be a really effective way of doing that. Um, I want to be I the Rochester bike facility stuff. I like using level of traffic stress. Um, I feel I personally, as a probably an LTS2 cyclist in general, feel that quite a few of their speed assumptions on the various facilities are optimistic about what counts. Honestly, I'm usually okay on the bike lanes on branch. on a weekend. I would avoid that on a weekday, even though theoretically, according to these assumptions, that should still be LTS2. It really starts to feel LTS3 very quickly just because, I mean, it's technically 25, people drive 30, and 30 right next to a bike lane, it does not feel safe at all. So I want to be perhaps a bit more, we'll say, realistic about those numbers, and assume that people will actually want lower speeds and less volume in general. But otherwise, I'm really about LTS. Yes, Kirsten.
I agree. I think that we need to build infrastructure though for LTS3. And just assume we need to always build infrastructure for more vulnerable users and those who do not feel comfortable or safe maneuvering through traffic. I'm at LTS1.
Right.
I never think about myself when I'm looking at intersections. I always think, what would a parent with a small child feel like, or what would an 80-year-old person feel like biking to get groceries or walking to get groceries? That's always what I'm thinking. And I think as a city, we really need to build infrastructure for LTS3, period.
Think you mean LTS 1.
Oh, wait.
One is the lowest level of stress and 4 is the highest.
Okay. But the stress, so wait now.
So LTS 1 is the 8 to 80.
No,
LTS
no, LTS1 is strong and fearless.
Sorry.
They're two different infographics. You're looking at page 14 with the distribution of bicyclist types, whereas LTS is the levels of street traffic.
Mm.
Oh.
So it's like inverted
Yep,
from
yep.
what you're saying. Yep.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Keaton. So I think that we need to build infrastructure for the least confident cyclists and pedestrians.
Yeah.
The most vulnerable users, period. Like that's would you feel comfortable if your 85-year-old grandparent was in a wheelchair trying to maneuver through to get to groceries? Would you send them out on that route? And I think that we need to look at things. Or would you feel comfortable having your 7 or 8-year-old biking to school or to the pool? That's what we need to look at for every single route.
As somebody who has just started biking to school with her 6-year-old son, I will +1 that. I'm fine, but it's like crossing university is just terrifying for him, even at the light.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, on University, even stopping at the traffic signal with people moving 50 miles an hour within 2 feet of you is really terrifying.
And I think kind of building off that, what you were saying about starting biking to school, one thing that occurred to me was adoption, people starting to bike in general. How can we try and utilize these tools to get more people using bikes and alternative means of transportation? And I think the building a secure, a more accessible biking infrastructure will definitely help with that. Personally, like I grew up in Missouri and there was no biking infrastructure whatsoever where I was from. So coming up here to Madison, it was a bit of a like faltering start to seek out what paths I was most comfortable with, where were the protected lanes, where were the lake loops and everything. Yeah, so just adding more opportunities for that, I think, would do a world of good with just recruiting more people to view biking as a viable means of commuting, transportation. Yeah.
And Keaton, we've discussed having bike buses. The east side has a lot of bike buses at the beginning of the year. And we have discussed that. I don't have kids, so I wouldn't be the best at that. But I think several years ago, we were looking at Sauk Trail as being our first, back when Jim Blodgett was the chair, being our first school that we were going to try to do bike buses to.
Oh,
And
that's lovely.
hopefully we can,
Yes.
because I think North Side and Sauk Trail would be great for that.
And by buses, you mean like a caravan of families? Like, yeah, my neighbors in downtown Middleton bike their kids to Elm Lawn, and we're planning to, when my 6-year-old goes to Elm Lawn next year, this fall, we're planning to join that bike bus, so I can report back on that. It's very like informal and casual, but it seems good. Yeah. One other thought that I had just on kind of thinking creatively about like funding mechanisms, which again, I defer to the city on, is just, as we think about some of these interventions, first and foremost, safety is the priority, right? And the concern, full stop. But after that, it seems like a lot of these interventions also could have the added benefit of, beautifying the streetscape, if you will, right? And so I wonder if there's any just partnership opportunities with the tourism department, right? I could see putting a roundabout, right, that serves to slow traffic down on like entries into downtown Middleton, but you could also put signage, right? You could put flowers. Thinking about Tad's tactical intervention suggestion. I'm thinking I lived in Brooklyn a long time ago, and there are all these beautiful like planted pots and like colored pavements that they slowed down traffic. Or Times Square was a good example of that. But they also just made the whole neighborhood that much more attractive. And so I wonder if there's ways to think of that as a secondary goal of some of this work.
I think in the Rochester one, they showed pictures too of the painted traffic circles, the decorative traffic circles, if you will, or I think it was in the Rochester one that they showed that. And we have discussed that in previous meetings too, as a way to slow traffic.
It's
I'm not
important.
sure about, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, what were you saying?
I was just gonna talk about the funding mechanisms. I'm not sure if tourism would be the best about funding, because they generally are geared towards like the heads and beds for, bringing people into Middleton with the hotel tax and all of that. But our arts committee has, like I think it's the 0.5% for arts. And so they have a pretty steady fund for, putting in art pieces and all of that around the city. So I think that could be a great, partnership opportunity for something like that. Yeah.
With roundabouts, it's actually important to have something in the center blocking line of sight through it to ensure that people know they need to turn. So a tree or a large public sculpture is a pretty good way to do that. Um, I would also like to have the short and long-term bicycle parking kind of up there implement in terms of priorities. I have noticed back when we were redoing the bus stops for the change in the bus network, I harped a lot on making sure we had bike parking at the stops, and we do have it at most of them. And I'm not sure I've seen it used a lot by riders, but I have noticed it being used a lot by people who need somewhere to park their bike. Because as it turns out, our bus stop bike parking is some of the most abundant bike parking in the city functionally. So I think that's strongly hinting at a still pretty significant need. And then what else do I have? Oh, I really liked that the Sun Prairie toolkit mentions advisory bike lanes. This is a technique that they may not be using immediately in the near future that we may not be using immediately in the near future. However, this is standard practice in such places as the Netherlands and Denmark, places that are well regarded for their bicycling culture. I've ridden on them. They are nice. Um, and they are appropriate for smaller, quieter neighborhoods such as many we find in Middleton. So I think including doesn't necessarily have to be a high priority, but including something like that ahead of possibly actually using it. There are some complications relating to the FHWA there, but including something like that ahead of actually using it is a good idea so that at least some people won't be surprised when it starts showing up. Um, and then related to that, and also things like bike boulevards, the signage, um, in general, if you want to enforce correct behavior, the best thing is the built environment itself, concrete over signs. But signs are great for informing about future changes. They're cheaper and faster to install. So as long as we are not trying to use signs as a substitute for actually doing the concrete in the future, signs are a great place to start. Um, actually, I think Steve said something about the wayfinding signage. I am currently in Fayetteville, Arkansas at the moment, and just yesterday we were uh driving and we happened to cross one of their trails, and they have a very extensive trail system that I've seen many times before. But what I noticed this time was the fact that they had a US bike route sign up on their main trail to inform you that you are traveling on and we have discussed that in the past for our US bike route. So I would like to kind of uh, work on that again. Um, Informing people that there is in fact a US bike route there is kind of key to making people aware that that exists at all. Uh, like Keaton said, it's awareness and acquiring new bicycle riders. Um, kind of an important first step.
Can you guys
Here's
hear me? Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Oh, Kim, go ahead.
Sorry, guys. I'm having some serious technical problems. I'm trying to take this through my phone, which I don't typically take a Zoom meeting on my phone, and there's nowhere to like raise my hand in the tiny icon. So I apologize. It's been an afternoon. So yes, I agree with so many of the things that have already been said. I want to highlight just a few, just in my own travels in the last couple of weeks, through Minneapolis and through Fargo. I think that signage is great. Wayfinding signs are extraordinarily helpful in letting people know where they are. Minneapolis around the Chain of Lakes trails, which I think could be similar to Pheasant Branch, actually separates out a bike path and a pedestrian path. Now, that doesn't mean that pedestrians sometimes go on the bike path or vice versa. I didn't see a lot of it, but I was there on a Friday afternoon and maybe not the busiest time, but that seemed to me to be so much safer. Not only that, but there was on the pavement a posted speed limit, 10 miles an hour on the bike path, and it was a one way, which was maybe not feasible for this, but I really love the idea of being able to, in some of those spaces that we were talking about at the last meeting, separating out pedestrian and bicycle traffic, not only for safety purposes, but for potentially having a different kind of surface. One could be limestone, one could be paved, and that way we get a little bit for everyone. Bicycle boulevards, again, I think that those should be signed. I fully agree. I would like to see some paint actually too, which was shown in, I believe it was the Rochester pictures, where they have the arrows and the bicyclists just denote like this is part of the bicycle boulevard. Madison has that in between that segment of the Cap City Trail where it connects up. That's the bicycle boulevard, and it's painted and not just signed. Sometimes it's nice to have that visual cue if through a residential street. We could very easily do that through Elmwood. We should do that on the part of the path along Century where it jogs into the residential neighborhood and then back out. I think that is signed. I think that would be helpful as well. Landscaping, we talked about that very briefly. I really liked the picture of using landscape planters or trees instead of traditional bollards. I think that does in fact make that visually more appealing, but also deters potential motorized vehicles more than say a yellow concrete or iron stick in the ground, which looks like, yeah, you couldn't miss it. It's small enough that it could be missed, or people try to get around. They're not likely to try to get around a planter. And then finally, to the idea that, if we build bicycle infrastructure, they will come 100%. If we plan and make those implement those ideas that make it more safe for you to bike somewhere or to walk somewhere, to take an alternate mode of transportation, that people will take it. I really feel like there's an appetite for that. And if we build the infrastructure to support it, then people are more likely to take advantage of that, not the other way around, not like, let's wait for there to be a demand for it and then build it. We need to create that. Thanks.
Kirsten.
Yeah, so just talking about the bike boulevard, since we just discussed that, there is actually Cedar Ridge is a bike boulevard. And you may not have seen the bike with the arrows because Public Works chose to paint that right in the line of where cars park. So they're all covered up by parked cars. I am not a fan of bike boulevards, honestly, just because every study shows that they don't really make it safer. And in a winter climate, that's oftentimes covered up, so people don't see it. So I actually prefer not using bike boulevards unless it's the last ditch effort, I guess, that we don't really have any other options. But if you bike Cedar Ridge, and I encourage everybody to go out and bike Cedar Ridge, which is the connector from Highland to Highland, where we have the missing link on the North Mendota Trail. And I encourage you to bike it both directions. It is not safe as a bike boulevard at all, because of fast moving traffic and blind corners. So if we are going to do bike boulevards, we really have to think about, is it appropriate? Is it safe? I would have actually preferred us not having it put in at all there. And I bike it probably 4 times a day. So that's one thing to think about. I was just gonna ask if most of you have seen the NACTO site, NACTO. I know that Tad has, and it's a really nice site talking about a lot of this, and most Midwestern cities have adopted it now. And kind of giving the pros and cons of all of this infrastructure stuff. Folks might want to just check it out to see. Yep. Minneapolis uses it. I think Milwaukee is moving towards it. Tab, does Fayetteville use it?
Not sure. They use something very close. Most of the deviations I've seen from it are actually more European.
Sure. Which is
even better. But yeah, I think in general they adhere pretty closely to the principles.
Sure. Yeah. Most platinum rated cities like Portland and Seattle are using the NACTO.guide. And if we can adopt as much as we can, or possibly from that, I think it would be very good for our toolkit. I don't know how much people want to dive into it, but it's a nice guide. Ted, you've looked at it frequently, I know.
Yeah, and I'll add, we actually just brought this up to our Public Works Committee because, you know, as we were talking about construction areas with complete streets, they have a great, you know, overview of how to, you know, if you close a lane on a street for construction, how to design it so it's safer for pedestrians and all that. So we actually just talked about this with our Public Works Department, which is great. Yeah.
You know, I just want to put in with our guide, we want to make it intuitive. So if you think about how people move to get to work and school or places of business, we want to make the guide intuitive, I think, and then what we're doing to implement things intuitive. I think that the Cedar Ridge stuff is a great example. It's not intuitive at all. And I see people get really confused all the time. If we have all of these little sections that are haphazard, we're going to get people who are disenchanted from choosing to bike, bus, or walk to get to places. So making things easy to get to, straightforward. Also the path that goes from CVS back and around, you'll see a lot of people just taking the sidewalk because it's not intuitive and it doesn't feel like a straight away. I know that we had to do that because of eminent domain, but wherever we can, I think that we need to make straightaways and easy choices for people.
Somewhat building off of that, I believe the Rochester one did touch on it a bit, but we talked a lot about connectivity last meeting, and that I feel like it goes very similar to what Kirsten was just talking about and everything of the just making that a point that we call out in this toolkit in the plan to try and prioritize increased connectivity of the paths, and I think that would help with the like safety, the adoption, the ease of use, you know, all of these things. But not sure if that's exactly this toolkit or not. It's just something that popped to mind.
I mean, I think that's a great point to just put like at the beginning of the ATP, you know, like the overall goal, you know, connectivity and safety. I think that's a great point.
Also, just a fun fact, I looked up the NACTO website and it looks like Madison's a member now. So in good company.
Do we have any more feedback at the moment? All right, item number 2.
Okay, I'll give an overview of this and then as well. But basically, we've been getting a lot of complaints about, you know, street obstructions with overgrowth of weeds and all of that. And so, you know, this happens basically every year, you know, whenever, you know, it starts raining a lot and all the plants start growing a lot. And so we thought it would be a really great idea if we, you know, were able to create either some kind of handout or, you know, something that went out with the utility bills or the Public Works newsletter, something that can be, you know, easily packaged, and just to remind people, you know, who own properties on, you know, with sidewalks and all of that, to keep their, you know, bushes and all of that in order. And so attached to the packet, our intern, you know, found all the areas. There's like 5 different, you know, ordinances that talk about, you know, keeping the streets clear and all of that. And so we've included that in the packet. And then he also found a lot of really great, you know, educational materials that other cities have created, with very similar, you know, they have very similar standards to us. So we were talking about, you know, what we could do, to just kind of get out this public education thing and, you know, send it out every year in the spring water utility bill, or, you know, make it like a cute little postcard that we can send out, you know, basically every year just to remind people about these things because it is, just a recurring issue that we've been finding with our code compliance person is every year, running around and trying to get people to just like mow their lawns. So, yeah.
Kirsten.
Yeah, this is something I've been working on a lot with Denny, and I've been speaking with Daphne a little bit, and the alders, especially Lisa Hinaro, about this. I think we need to attack this from 3 different ways because I report to Denny, our compliance person, probably 3 or 4 times a week of giving addresses. And I've witnessed a lot of people either having to walk out into like Century Avenue or a busy street, or sadly, I saw a person having to take a wheelchair out into Century Avenue to try to get around encroachment. And we discussed this at the last meeting a little bit. I think we need to go about this in 3 ways. Education, like a PSA that's sent out in a way at the beginning of the year with the bill. I think it needs to be short and sweet, listing our codes, but also talking about being a good neighbor in the good neighbor city. I think using a picture that is very in your face, like a person in a wheelchair trying to maneuver a sidewalk that's overgrown. One of those in the packet was of that, and I thought that was great. Or a parent with a child trying to maneuver. Let's go big. Let's talk about vulnerable users again. Yep, there we go. And Lisa Hinaro also gave a great idea of the little door hangers. And we can really go about it like, hey, as a member of the Good Neighbor City, on houses that are not complying, as a gentle reminder. And we can hang it on the door, listing our codes. But I think that the big thing is, like most cities, we need to find people who are not compliant. I really think that we need to nail this. And I think a lot of people, almost all the people that I report to Denny are offenders that offend every year, multiple times a year, with shoveling and with encroachment. The only way to get them to change is to find them. And we need to stand by that. It is in our code that they will be fined and charged by the city. And we need to start doing that. I think that's the way to get people to change. We can be friendly and nice, but that's not always going to get people to cut back the encroachment. So if we hit it from 3 different sides, I think that's maybe what the city needs to do. In Minneapolis and in Madison, if you don't shovel or if you don't cut back your encroachment, you will be fined. There is no nicety. You'll be warned and then fined, given 48 hours, period. If we start doing that, people will change.
And so what is the enforcement mechanism here? So my neighbor's foliage just got chopped down by the city. And I heard from neighbors that they're then applying the penalty to his tax bill. Is that how we enforce? And is that different than like a straight up you owe the city money, or is that how you enforce it?
Yeah, there are different aspects because that I think might be related to the street trees, like the ones that are on the other side of the sidewalk, between the sidewalk and the street. If the city, we do routine maintenance on those since we technically own those trees, and then those are, I believe, billed on the property taxes. And then, for the ones that are on the inside of the sidewalk, those are, up to the property owner. And I believe we do have citations, but they're like, I think that's like a very minimal, it's like $25 or something kind of thing. And then Denny has to like go out every single day and check. And like, he's basically driving all around Middleton for, like all of the ones that have been cited. And so, yeah, so something like that. We do have some sort of citation, but it's I think not enough to prevent people from doing it, you know?
Daphne, if I heard correctly from Denny, they're essentially supposed to be charged what it costs the city or another entity to go and cut the stuff down.
Mm,
Like, so if it's $50 to mow it down, that bill will be billed to the homeowner, correct?
okay, okay.
That's what Denny said to me.
Okay, yeah. That I think makes a lot more sense than just, you know, finding them every single day for, you know, not being in compliance. Because I think that's how some of our other building inspection fines go. So I wasn't actually sure how Denny did it for the weeds and all of that.
That's what it's supposed to be. However, homeowners have been fighting back, and that's one thing that Denny has really run into is that homeowners will then go above him and tell Public Works that, oh, I was on vacation for 3 weeks and you didn't give me enough time. And so then they're given an extension and then they still don't do it. And they put up such a stink that somehow they get out of paying the bill. And I think that we just need to get hard on it and have them billed. I mean, they can't get out of their taxes if they put up a stink. Why should they be able to get out of this? That's what being a good neighbor is. You're a part of a community. You're a homeowner in a community. And I think we really need to hit hard with that term. Being a part of a good neighbor city is being a good neighbor to all, including vulnerable users and people who get around in wheelchairs and stuff like that. And if we keep using that terminology and keep holding people accountable, it sends a message out to everyone.
So maybe the next step for this is I'll talk with Denny to see if we have some kind of policy in place, basically. Like it sounds like he has, you know, he'll fine them for however much it costs, but perhaps like well, we could create a policy of, you know, we'll send out the utility, you know, all properties get like a, hey, you know, March, you know, remember to cut things down. And then, you know, if they don't, the first time they don't comply, they get like the nice door hanger. Second time, you know, Denny will go visit them. And then, you know, the third time is, you know, just a citation kind of thing. Because I think the issue here is that we don't really have like a policy or a way to do it. And so that's why people can kind of, they'll reach out to, you know, the planning director, the public works director, and then, you know, make up, you know, kind of bog down the process that way. And so if we have, you know, a defined more like policy of this is how it's done and this is, you know, how it is, perhaps that could clear it up a little bit and make it a little easier for Denny to at least, you know, do the part that he needs to do.
Yeah, Daphne, I think that's too easy because that could go on for a month. I think that we, you know, and that means that maybe a sidewalk is not passable for an entire month, especially in a year like this year with all the rain. I know that in Minneapolis, you're given 48 hours. You are given a warning and you're given 48 hours. And if you don't do it, you are fined. I think that we need to get harder. Our code, and I sent you pictures from our city webpage, our code, I think says 10 days. You have 10 days. I think that once you are warned, we need to set that date and you will be fined if you do not hit it. We can give them a warning within that time, but I think we need to hold it firm. Otherwise, people will constantly try to push and shove their way out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I like your three-prong approach, Kirsten, especially the educational piece is coming first. I think there are some general ways to do it. And the thing that really jumped out was, you know, the door hangers. I'm just trying to figure out a way you could you know, get a volunteer force to somehow put them out, you know, or that might be something that, you know, maybe they get put at the library. I don't know. You know, I mean, I'm willing to be an obstruction police. You know, there are times I'm with you. There are places I go now, things are growing over, and I think you know, I should be bringing my clippers with me just to clear it off. So I'm just wondering if there might be some gentle ways that we could do that might get it done very quickly. You know, if people, for instance, if people aren't around, or maybe it's a rental, who knows? But you know, and if you you know, Daphne, if you had said somebody was working potentially on some kind of educational piece, it seems to me you get that might be, you know, a bill stuffer. You could cut that down probably pretty easily into something that would be a doorknob hanger, which would be great. I'm just thinking those first couple, because then it could be done potentially quickly. I think people aren't often aware of it. You know, then there are some people who just ignore all that, I'm sure. But, you know, for a lot of folks, I think, you know, a soft approach right off, just educating them, they might just respond. And if you had that on your door, I just think if I came home and I saw that, I think, oh dear, you know, I didn't realize this tree in my alley's hanging over. I got to deal with it. Actually makes me think my tomato plants are starting to hang over into the back alley. So
Sounds like a good way to lose tomatoes.
I think
I,
neighbors are eating them as they walk by too. So
I like Steve's optimistic view of humanity. I think I share Kirsten's somewhat darker views, particularly on this issue. I think one just additional point I'll make is whatever the process is, wherever you guys land on days and steps and all that, I think that there is something about being upfront and transparent about what the fee is and when it will be incurred that is arguably the most important point of all of this. Because I think a lot of people are motivated by loss aversion. They don't want to lose their money beyond just being a good Samaritan, to just being transparent of like, this is the fee. And if it's a range, it's a range. You could be fined anywhere from $50 to $150. But I think putting that in writing is going to motivate the other people that aren't as good as Steve.
I just have a kind of question because I'm curious about it. I really liked the kind of notion of providing urgency to it, and 10 days does seem like a very protracted period of time to have such obstructions present. So what would be the process to going from like the current policy of 10 days to like a policy of 48 hours, like in those other cities? What would that look like, I guess?
I mean, that I think would be an ordinance change. We would, amend our ordinances that all say, the 10-day period down to, 48 hours. And so, that could be something that, Ped Bike Transit recommends to our License and Ordinances Committee. And then they would, recommend that ultimately to Common Council to approve.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mhm.
And then we'd have to make Denny full-time for sure.
Yeah.
And actually, does everybody have Denny's email? It was, I think, 2 or 3 years ago that Mark Opitz sent it to everybody. So everybody can write into him as the compliance manager. And he really does well with emails just stating the address and then a picture and showing what the encroachment is. And it's kind of like the Madison report a problem button, but it's through email. Daphne, would you be able to send everybody out his email?
Yeah,
Not to overload him more than he is already, but it does help him because then he can check back. And
Mhm.
he has a specific address. It helps a lot.
Yeah, and I think we technically added that to the city of Middleton's. We have a report a concern page on the website as well, and so that will also, I think, kick it directly to Denny. I think there is a specific one for weed compliance, something, or street obstruction might be the phrasing of it. So that will, like, it opens like a ticket and everything for him, and he'll like have to close it out once it's in compliance and all of that.
Do we change our report a concern, because it used to be extremely janky where you would have to enter in your email and set up a password.
It's still like that.
Yeah, so I think that's horrible. We need to change that. It needs to be a lot like Madison's, where it's just the button.
Okay.
Because if you have a password, I mean, who remembers all of their password? And if you have to go through 10 steps, it's just not going to happen.
I strongly agree. I will frequently just put up with things simply because having to pull out my smartphone and log into a form in order to report something that is going to cause me potential injury right now that's too much. Um, there's probably no perfect way to do it at the moment, but just all those extra steps of all this just to avoid a possibly small amount of misreporting it seems like overkill and a good way of discouraging actually uh, getting stuff done.
Yeah. And Denny did say to go ahead and just email him. And so I think if all of us have his email, we don't need to be sharing it with every person we know, but we all know what we're looking at. And if the committee members have it, I think it would be helpful.
All right. Do we have any more feedback for Daphne at the moment? I'm assuming there's no budget for little cards that play Sarah McLachlan songs as people open them.
You know what though, the funding, Lisa Hinaro said, sustainability rarely uses all of their funds, and that would be a good way to tap in for those door hangers is the sustainability committee.
All right. Last item tonight, the committee work plan. So I can actually talk a bit about this. Last year we started doing this work plan. We made a work plan for essentially the next year of the things we wanted to prioritize. Um, the big things especially. Um, so we would like to update that. This goes on our committee webpage so that people can look at it and see what we are attempting to do for the coming year. With that, and then so we have our action, our volunteers, and we update our comment as we go through. It's a standing agenda item. With that in mind, because it can be overwhelming to get over ambitious and volunteer for everything, it is best to keep this short. Probably no more than, well, I mean, we have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 items on there. That's probably about the most we want to do. In general. So let's actually go over it. That's for this calendar year. So we actually let's start at the bottom, the unsafe crossings, because we did get the signage at Costco. Do we know how we're doing for the Goodwill driveway?
Yeah, so we actually well, we haven't gotten the signs over to Goodwill, but we reached out to Goodwill because our Public Works was not amenable to having them put up the signs on private property, since the best location would be, you know, kind of in the parking lots of Goodwill. And so we just reached out to the owners and they were very amenable, like, yeah, just give us the sign, give us a pole and we'll put it up. And so we're right now looking for the right poles. I think we're just going to send our intern to Menards to go pick some up tomorrow or something like that. And so then we should be getting the signs and the polls in the next week or so. So they should be up, you know, sometime after that. Yeah.
Awesome.
And so, yeah. And we have, I think there were like 8 of those signs total. So 2 of them are going to Goodwill. And then, you know, there's 6 more. And I think Mark had identified all the locations to put them at. And so
Okay.
we reached out to, I think, at least half of the locations. And So Goodwill, and then there were another like one or two businesses that were just very much like, yeah, sure, we'll put them up, just let us know, how we can pick them up and, what kind of polls to get and all of that. So it's been actually pretty surprising how, willing these businesses are to put them up on their property.
Daphne, let's get some pictures of that and put it on our website under this, because I think it would be great for people to see what we're doing, not just see it in writing, but actually
Agreed.
see a
Yeah.
picture. And I think that there were 10. He got 10 signs.
Yeah, there are 8 in my office, so I think
Two were already put up at Costco, right?
I think 2 are at Costco, 2 are going to Goodwill, and then we have 6 left. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Right. So jumping back to the top, the active transportation plan, we heard about and we talked about some of the work on that
Mhm.
today. Bike Week 2025, that's done for the year. Week Without Driving, that is coming up. We talked about the resolution last meeting. The annual progress report for the complete streets, that happened in March. Complete streets. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, sorry. I was just
Go
gonna
ahead.
say, so we're typically planning on having that like around November, December every
Okay.
year, because we do a annual comprehensive plan annual report as well. So we're planning on
Okay.
having those pretty much like in tangent with each other. So we'll probably have one in either November or December for you this year for another one
Excellent.
for 2025. But yeah.
Um, Gonna skip over my thing for a minute. High school outreach. I don't think we ever really solidified that. Kirsten.
The main thing coming up that we're going to have the high school outreach for is Week Without Driving, trying to get kids
Mhm.
to bike to school for a day during that week. And
Okay.
so, yeah, that's the one thing that we're going to be working on.
Okay. Um, and then are we are we still focusing on coordinating with the police this year?
We can try that again. It was just, I
Yeah.
was like the worst storm that happened with that emergency call. And I think that we need to reach out to the new police chief to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Maybe we can have the new police chief attend one of our meetings and have that as an agenda item to redo that course with EMS and police. Because the turnout was so low and the person in charge of it, the police officer in charge of it, didn't even tell the officers until the day prior, even though it was planned months ahead. So maybe we can do a little committee meeting with the new chief.
Okay.
Yeah, and I will say the new chief created it's like a traffic safety staff group that we meet, monthly it'll probably be more like quarterly. And so he's very interested in traffic safety, but also, traffic safety in general, but also, pedestrian, bicyclists and all of that as well. So he seems like very amenable to a lot of this, educational stuff and all of that too. So I'm sure he'd love to come to one of our meetings.
That'd
Yeah,
be
that sounds great.
Yeah, because we were also talking, I mean, for 3 years, they've talked about doing a pedestrian sting or a crosswalk sting, and it still hasn't happened. And I know I would volunteer for that. So that, warnings were given out to drivers not stopping for people in crosswalks. That can be something discussed.
All right. And then to jump back to the Complete Streets implementation guidance. So the comment is outdated. We have missed that June 2025 goal. That's okay. I am still working on this. Um, I, with Kirsten's permission, I would like to see if somebody else would like to volunteer to take her place so that she's not trying to do everything. Does not have to be tonight. But just think about it. So looking at this guide, is this still how we are thinking of our work for the rest of the year? Thea.
Yeah, Ted, can you just say a little bit more about what kind of support you're looking for on the Complete Streets Guide?
So so at the beginning, what I am finding is that it is easy to have ideas. It is much harder to make progress if I don't have someone to bounce ideas off right away. So right at the beginning, that's the first thing I'm looking for. Someone to bounce ideas off, it's someone to write for, essentially. That is will be able to give more immediate feedback than planning ahead to the next month. It's very difficult to get motivated to write something for potentially the next month's meeting. It's much easier to get motivated to write something for somebody who I know will be able to, even just a small piece, will be able to skim it and give me feedback
Yeah.
that same week. So it would not be a huge thing right away unless you want to do some writing too. That's allowed. I am perfectly willing to have other people write sections of this too. It's not my baby. I just want all of us to get it done somehow.
Yeah.
Um, so again, doesn't have to be tonight, but unless you're volunteering, Thea.
I'd be happy to be a reviewer for you. That feels like
Okay.
pretty low lift. And I think that's probably a better use of my talents is to review what you write. So
Right.
but I'm happy to be that accountability person if helpful.
Yeah, that sounds great. Um, okay, so again, does this particular work plan still seem good for the rest of the year? If I hear silence, I'm going to assume the answer is yes. Kirsten.
I love it because I don't believe we should move on to other things until we've completed what's on the sheet.
All right. Okay. Well, future events, B-cycle demonstration.
Yes, so this is actually very new, but so 2 nights ago at council unanimously approved the resolution that you guys looked at last meeting to go for that TAP grant. And so we've worked out some more details with B-Cycle, and so they're willing to come to Middleton, and they just sent this out this morning to us. But so they're gonna come to Middleton on August 20th, and you can do like a test ride around Stonehorse Green. If you're interested in learning more about it. And also I'll send this out to you guys as well, along with Denny's info, but feel free to send this to, as many people as you'd like, people who are interested in B-Cycle, people who've never tried it before. And so, there's an opportunity to do a test ride, and then later on at 5:30, I think they're bringing 12 bicycles. So, 12 people can go on the e-bike group ride with Capital Brewery if they're interested in it as well. And so this is kind of just to get more people, aware of B-Cycle that could be coming to Middleton, and then also, to bring up more support, because basically the next hurdle after this resolution is council is voting on the budget. And so we're hoping to get all the capital budget, passed safely through. And so if we can, because I believe I'm working on the grant right now, it's due on Monday, but basically it's around $300,000. And so the city portion would be required to match 20% of that, so $60,000. And so we need to get that passed through our budget. And so if people are, interested and supportive of it, it'd definitely be helpful to, come to some of the budget meetings. I know they can be a lot and very boring, a lot of numbers, but yeah, we can definitely, let people know when, the planning department's budget is going to be talked about at council and all of that. And so that's kind of the next cycle is, can we get it into our budget? And then, if we get the grant and all of that, it could very likely be next year that we get the B-cycle stations.
Daphne, are we looking at having tourism pay for part of it?
I think that that's still in discussion. So the operating costs, so B-cycle was recently, I think, acquired by Bicycle Transit Networks or Systems.
Is yes, no track.
Yeah. They used to be Trek, and then BTS, yeah, they took over. And so they actually have a lot more like flexible options for operating costs and how we can do that. And so a lot of businesses can sponsor them and so they're asking for just a lot of contacts to, businesses, chamber events and all of that. And so as it is right now, I believe we should have a 5-year with no operating fees. And then after that, it would be supported by, sponsorships. And I think that aspect is definitely a lot more interesting for tourism to take, because then they can have, visit Middleton bikes on, all these things. And so that is at least the aspect that we've been discussing a little bit with B-cycle right now. Yeah.
Well, that's fun. I will not be in town for that, so somebody better go and plug us. All right. If we have if you have agenda items that you want to see in the future, make sure you email Daphne. And otherwise, that is the end of our agenda. So we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Ted.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
Night.
Have a good night, everyone.
Bye, Daphne.
Bye.